The next menu system available is the measurements menu. There are two methods of doing measurements on the instrument. We can use the rulers and do manual measurements, or we can use the automatic measurements. So if we wanted to measure, for example, the cycle time, we could do it manually by selecting the cursors, and we have a little icon where we can pick up the cursors, so I could position that on the peak of that sine wave and a second cursor on the second peak, and then we can read delta time between those cursors. So here we can see 10 microseconds. If I wanted to measure the amplitude, we also have amplitude cursors available, so I could put a cursor at the bottom of the waveform and a second cursor on the top of the waveform, and here we can measure the peak to peak value here manually as 1.788 volts. But similarly, we could do the same measurement automatically, so we could select the measurements menu and add a measurement, and the source has to be selected. So in this case we only have channel A available, but it could be from channel A, B, C and D, or it could in fact make measurements on a reference channel. Then there's a whole selection of amplitude and time measurements available. So for example, if I selected peak to peak, and we select the whole trace rather than between the rulers, and then when we say OK, this measurement becomes available. So here we can see we're making the measurement here again 1.8 volts peak to peak, and we do get some stats on it as well, the min and max values, etc. To remove a measurement, we can then just select delete and the measurement is removed. Other measurements available is the time measurements. So here we can measure frequency, cycle times, rise and fall times. One extra feature in the measurements menu, if we do have a spectrum display, we will get spectrum measurements. So I'll just quickly turn on the spectrum display, which is the third icon in the middle menu system. So here now we've gone to a spectrum display, and if we look at the measurements now, we'll see they are spectrum type measurements. So we have harmonic distortion, signal to noise ratio. So I'll just put the display back to the YT display. The next menu item along is the tools menu, and here we see a lot of extra features that are available, and these are all available as standard features in the product. So the first one is the custom probe menu, so we can customize our own input channel probing. So for example, it could be a current probe, and we could change the vertical scale factors then to display current. Under the math channel menu, we have standard built-in math functions, invert, adding and subtracting channels, multiplying, dividing channels. So for example, if we selected A minus B channel, that could give it a pseudo differential maths channel display. Under the library functions, we can build our own complex library function and save it as our own defined maths function. So we can create our own individual maths functions and save them. The third item down is the reference memory. So here we can handle any reference memories that have been displayed. So reference menus, we can do a right mouse click in the current display, and again we see it's like the views menu, so we can add views and channels, but here we can actually now add a reference waveform. So if I add a reference waveform of channel A, and now if I provide just a vertical offset, we can now see here we have a reference waveform displayed, and we still have the live acquisition being displayed. So now if I return to the tools menu, I can select reference menu. Now we can see we have a reference channel displayed, and again I could remove that from the display and select OK, and we just now have the live acquisition, and again we can just provide vertical offset by picking and dragging that particular waveform. Serial decoding, again available as a standard function on the product, and we can decode the CAN bus, I2C bus, RS232 and SPI. The next item down is the alarms menu, so we can define alarms, we can capture data, we can check if the data is gone outside a defined mask. And the mask menu is below that, so here we can build our own mask around a waveform and then use the alarm to check it. Under the preference menu, there's a lot of setups available for special functions. So for example, we can define the color of each trace. So a lot of special functions that can be declared about the particular setup of the product.